Here's the story. Last year in October, my mum's friend asked me if I could paint her 3 children, and I said yes. Let me tell you, I was terrified. I started the painting this year in March, and the prospect of painting 3 portraits on one canvas without messing them up was really scary. But the thing is, commissions always end up being my best paintings, so in this video I'll show you step by step how I go about a painting, which colors I use, how much time I spend on certain sections, and how I get over that fear of the blank page. And most importantly, how you can do it too. So before you start a painting, there are certain things that you need to do. This is step 0, if you will. I always start by preparing my space and getting all of my supplies together. For this painting, that didn't just consist of me cleaning my brushes, but also just of rebuying some of my oil colors that I knew I would need, and also most importantly, getting a canvas. If you want me to go more in depth with what brand or materials I use for painting, then let me know and I'll do a separate video about it. Now, step 1 is really important. I gesso my canvas. If you've never heard of gesso, don't worry. It's basically this white paint-like medium that you apply in a very thin layer on your canvas, and it sort of acts as a primer. It smoothens the structure of the canvas, but it also prevents your oil color from sinking into the canvas. I find that step is really important, especially when working with all sorts of canvases. I never really used to use gesso, but ever since using it, I just find that I can't really tell you why, but my paintings are better. And especially when you use oil painting paper, I would never not use gesso because I've had really bad experiences with the color sinking into the oil painting paper, and let me tell you, that's not great. Gesso takes a little bit to dry, so usually I'll put it on the day before so that I can fully dry before I start my painting process. So that takes us to step 2, the drawing. Personally, I would always spend quite some time on the sketch because it will act as the foundation of your painting. I always sort of used to disregard sketching, but if your sketch is shit and you are not as experienced that you can correct your mistakes when sketching, when painting, then your painting will have the wrong proportions or it will just not be great. There are painters who can sketch with oil colors and who can just correct their mistakes. While doing that, personally, I'm not there yet. I can correct some mistakes, but I like to have the peace of mind to know that my sketch is in a good condition so that I can just paint and not think about the sketch while painting. When you do your sketch, there are 2 routes that you can go down. Sketch freely by hand or use some sort of method that provides guidance. Personally, I like to use the grid method. I don't always use the grid method. I tend to use it really loosely, and I'll just put a very big loose grid on it to provide some guidance on the big white canvas. But for commissions, I always like to use it. So this is how it works. I will use an app to put a grid on my reference pictures, and then I'll loosely draw the grid on the canvas. For this one, honestly, the grid was quite intricate and it took me so long. But personally, I like doing it whenever I do commissions because, first of all, I just don't want to have the added stress of getting the proportions right and stressing about the sketch. So I'll take the quote-unquote lazy road and put a very intricate grid on it. Also, don't forget to spray some fixing spray on your finished drawing because I've learned the hard way that if you don't do it, your graphite will smudge when you paint and you don't want that. Alright, we're getting to step 3, the painting. This is obviously the biggest part of the process, and I thought I would just first talk to you about the colors I use and then just talk to you about my process and talk to you about any topic that I honestly could think of that you might have questions about. If you still have things that you want me to talk about or any questions come up, then please write me a comment or message me on Instagram or anywhere you can message me and I'll answer. However, before I start the actual painting, I'll do an underpainting. An underpainting for me tends to be a light ochre wash that acts as a starting point and sort of in a way gets rid of the big scary white canvas in front of me. I never really used to do underpaintings, but I find that it's just a very nice basis to work on, and personally I like the way the ochre color affects the other colors that I'll put on top of it for the portraits, and I like if it sort of shines through in a way. And in this case, The underpainting will also serve as a background color. About a year and a half ago, I started limiting my oil color palette to certain colors, and personally, I think that's the best thing I've done in my painting journey. Often I'll use some of the same color palette for my paintings, and personally, I would always advise you to not use too many colors. You just don't need more than the basics. Otherwise, I've found that it just gets too messy, and I don't concentrate on the color mixing that much, which in turn makes me less conscious of what colors I'm using, and then my paintings never work out the way I want them to. I will list the specific colors that I am using here in the video description, but basically I always tend to use a aqua color, a dark brown, a red, a blue for mixing darker colors like a purplish color, a white, and then sometimes black. I don't use black for my normal mixing, but I'll use it for certain areas, like for the hair, for example, or certain shadows. Finally start the portrait painting process. I started with the left portrait of the man because personally I just felt more comfortable with that. When starting, I always tend to follow a certain rule, and this rule works really great for me, and I would advise you to do the same or find some sort of process that just works for you. Personally, I always start with a big brush. I don't focus on details, but try to think of the face in color blocks, and I'll go by that. I always start by using the darkest colors, and then I'll move on to the midtones and add the lighter colors while still thinking in bigger shapes. This personally really helps me, and I think whenever I made that shift, my oil paintings got better. So the first step is blocking in colors. I find that dividing the painting into steps helps me get over that fear of messing it up, because in a way it is like I follow my own step-to-step tutorial, but also it just simplifies the process. I don't have to think about the finished portrait or certain details. I can just focus on the one thing in front of me, and step by step I'll get there. Also, it helps me move slowly, and I really think about what I'm doing and not fully rush through the process, which personally was a lesson I had to learn the hard way. I used to rush my paintings way too much. I used to think that I would have to complete a entire portrait in one day, and that's just not something that is good for me. Also, just focusing on blocking in colors is a thing that I've learned recently that has helped me loads, because it simplifies the thought process. I don't get too lost in the details, and I just focus on what's in front. Cause you thrill me, you chill me out. Got no reason to pretend I'm somewhere or someone else. When you're around, you heal me. So for this specific portrait, I ended up working on all the three portraits side by side. Not at the same time, but sort of going through each step with each portrait before moving on to the next step. Also, you've probably noticed that I've worked on it for quite a few days now, and that's because I only tend to work a couple of hours at the time, and then I step away from the painting and return on another day. Partly that's because sometimes I just don't have the time, but it's more because I find that it really helps me to step away and return with new eyes the next day. There's always a point in my painting process with whatever painting I am painting where I can tell that I should probably stop and just step away. If I don't stop, then I'll overwork it, and it will only get worse from there on, and I'll rush the painting process. Cause you thrill me, you chill me out. Got no reason to pretend. So from now on, the process is mostly just me going back and forth on the different portraits and fixing areas that I've overworked or that I've gotten wrong. I often find this part of the painting quite nerve-wracking, to be honest, because at this point I'm often either stressed because certain things aren't quite right, but then it's also a time where I can still change things, but there are certain things that I can't change anymore, especially if the paint underneath is already dry. But for this painting was the case because I had to wait quite a long time between painting sessions because of other commitments, and if you have to work on dry oil painting, it's just not great.
Let's go to the city, shine with all the lights, sing on every corner. It could take all night, and that's alright. You thrill me.
In this painting, to be honest, I struggled most with the portrait of the woman. I just could not get her mouth and her general features right. Also, I struggled with the right man because I just made him look way too old and I had accentuated certain features too much. From now on, it's basically just going back and forth, adding details and correcting mistakes until I'm happy with it, or until I'm happy with a certain section and I can move on with the next one.
To me that's love.
So what do you do when you don't know where to start, you're terrified of the painting process, or you just get too much in your head when painting? First of all, I know it's cliche, but practice makes perfect. When you've completed a few paintings, you can rely on that and on the things you've learned, which then allows you to trust yourself because you've done it before. For me, in every painting process, no matter which painting I'm painting, there are always moments where I just have to trust in my ability to figure out what to do next, and I just have to rely on that. And also there are certain things that you will figure out when you just paint more. You will figure out what works for you, you will figure out what routines work for you, you'll figure out your own painting style, but also you'll figure out which steps you have to take to get where you want to. So practice makes perfect. I've said it before, but it just really helps me loads to divide the entire process into little steps like I've divided this video. It allows me to only focus on the one step that I'm doing at that time, and it allows me to work slowly and makes the whole process honestly less overwhelming. So I'd really just advise you to think in steps, not think, how can I get from this blank canvas to this painting, to the finished painting, but how can I get from this blank canvas to the sketch? Think about the gesso, think about the underpainting. And then when you get to the big portion where you actually paint, you can think of it as, okay, I'm doing the shadows now, I'm doing the midtones, I'm correcting this, I'm thinking of big areas that I can paint, big color blocks, and then I'm thinking about details, and I'm not thinking about all of that at the same time. As I've said before, personally, I find that stepping away from the painting also just always helps me because I don't rush it and I can return with fresh eyes. So I think those are my main tips for when you get too scared. You can just practice, you can rely on the steps, and if you want to, you can follow the steps that I've lined out for you. If you want me to go into any of the steps I've talked about more in depth, please let me know because I will do a video about it. I'll do some sort of tutorial, or I will just answer you in the comments. And last step for me was then waiting for a few weeks for the painting to fully dry and then painting the edges of the canvas, which honestly was scary in its own way. I did not mean to talk for that long, but I hope that this video can be hopeful. Wow, I hope that this video can be helpful. And thank you for watching. I also hope that the audio quality is better. I've gotten a podcast microphone because I am actually going to work on recording a podcast that will be on a account that I'll link in the video description, and I'm really excited for that, but I'm still figuring the audio and the microphone out, so if the audio quality is a bit weird for now, I'm going to figure it out, and hopefully overall it is better though. So yeah, thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought of this video. Let me know if it was helpful, and yeah, goodbye.